Our next speaker is Julian, and he is having a talk titled Generating Java Interfaces for Accessing Foreign Objects in GraalVM.
Thank you for the introduction. I would like to present my master thesis project, Generating Java Interfaces for Foreign Objects in GraalVM. But before I can explain what that actually means, I would first like to take a detour into GraalVM, which we heard a couple times today already. But I would like to focus on the feature that allows you to combine multiple programming languages in one process, in one project. Specifically for this talk, I would like to focus on the interaction between Java and Python, but most of what I will talk about can also apply to other languages. So as a motivating example, I will start with a simple Python function, which does nothing but print out a string. And now we want to call this from Java. How do we do that? There is a lot of boilerplate code, which is not ideal. I will go through it quickly. First, you have to create a new context. Then you have to evaluate the code, which I wrote above. And then you have to, once again, pull it out of the context and then use getMember to reach the function and execute it. This is a rather generic way of accessing Python code, and there's a lot of things that go wrong. For example, when creating the context, there are a lot of possible options which you only know about if you are diving deep into the documentation. The next thing is that you are heavily relying on strings to execute your code. And if you get anything wrong, the Java compiler will not tell you that something happened, and only at runtime it will crash. Of course, there's a solution to this, which is abstraction. So we can make an interface which has all the correct types and all the correct names, which hides all of this generic code. And my goal is to automate this process from having a Python function or code in general and generating interfaces from it. How do I do that? I have some Python code, and my goal is to extract various metadata. For example, for functions, constructors, fields, and class inheritance. I can do this. I tried to do this with my own typed extractor, but quickly realized there's already a project that does that for me, which is MyPy. Unfortunately, the part of the MyPy API that allows you to extract type metadata is largely undocumented, so we had to fight with that a bit. But in the end, we got everything we needed and could proceed with it. From this metadata, we then simply generated Java interfaces, which was a fairly straightforward process, but it also had some issues which I'm going to explain now. The trivial case is that you can simply take everything from Python and simply write it into Java syntax without much of a change. So you can take the log function I showed before and simply make the Java interface from it. And this will work for Java without complaints. However, if you have a function which is called void, which is perfectly fine Python code, but if you translate it into Java, you will have some issues. For example, the compiler will complain you can't use void as an identifier. There are obviously the keywords which don't work, but for example, the underscore also doesn't work because it's a reserved identifier. However, there is a simple solution for this. Usually, if we do this by hand, we simply append an underscore to it, and everything works. The next issue we encountered is that Python sometimes simply doesn't have any type annotations. So we can't figure out what it actually wants. So if the Python developer didn't provide us with any, we just have to assume the next best thing, which in our case is the most general type, which is object. There are also other concerns. For example, if we are generating interfaces, we can't instantiate new objects with the Java keyword new. So instead, we have to take the Python constructors and itself generate Java functions from it. These functions act as a constructor, so you don't need the new keyword, but beneath the surface, it does call the correct functions to instantiate the Python class. Another thing which is interesting about Python is that it supports multiple inheritance. Usually in Java, we don't have that, but interfaces do, which is also one of the reasons why we chose to implement interfaces and not just straight-up classes. The next problem we encountered is inheritance. In Python, you can add any attribute you want to a parameter, even if the inheritance doesn't make any sense. For example, here the dog inherits from animal. However, the parameter from pet is more general than the animal pet. So here we can't really do anything about making it the most general type. There are also some more transformation I have to apply, but they unfortunately didn't make it in my work in progress paper. But among these is generics, which is also very difficult to implement because the Python typewars are very different from the Java typewars, and it also affects operator overloading because in Java, generics are type erased to object, which causes conflicts. Unions is something that Java doesn't support at all, but I managed to create a wrapper which simplifies, or rather ensures some type safety of those unions. And my project is intended to be included in the GraalPython project and distributed in the near future. And we are also looking into adding support for more than just Python. And for example, we already have a working prototype for TypeScript and WebAssembly. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions?
So you mentioned earlier that you translate the init things in Python into methods that aren't constructors, but just functions that return the value. And I was wondering, it looks like it might be connected to the later decision around interfaces, but it was the reason you didn't translate them into just actual Java constructors, which are equivalent, roughly.
Yeah, another issue why we can't just do that is because in Python, constructors are also values, so it isn't always clear which constructor we should call. That's also a reason why we can't just use the concrete type.
Okay, I also have a...
Just a very quick and technical question. Shouldn't this Java constructor, like translated Java constructor, be actually static? Because for me, it doesn't really make sense to create an object, to call constructor on it to create another object.
When you use my generated types, I have a global object which has all these presumably constructors and other global fields from Python on it. So you don't have to create a new object just to create a new object.
Okay, thank you very much.
In the spirit of very pedantic questions, in a few cases you had the print thing and this type signature said it returned a string. Is that actually the case, or was it supposed to be taking a string and returning void? For log, I think.
Oh, yeah. It should return a void, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, one last quick question from me. Did you notice any problems with the truffle interop itself? So Python and Java are their own languages, right? And if you would have a bridge just between them, that might be different than going through the truffle interop that you're using, since that's kind of its own little language, which is kind of the smallest common denominator between the languages?
Of course, there were some implementation issues, but on architectural level, there were none at all. So it was generic to the point where you can use any underlying technology, and even the languages between truffles, for example, JavaScript and Python, were similar enough, so you can just swap it out.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Julian, once again.